Okay, let's go. Hello, welcome back again to day 3 of the SunX Malta Climate Friendly Travel Summer School. I'm Jeff Lippman. I'm the course director and I'm also the president of SunX Malta. I want to welcome everybody, those people who've been with us for the first couple of days and those of you who are just joining. Just for the latter group, I'll just repeat, SunX Malta is an EU-based NGO. We're partnered very happily with the government of Malta, and we're a legacy to a long-standing leader in the global sustainability and climate activist world. That is Maurice Strong, who is basically the father of the whole UN system, now dealing with sustainability through the SDGs, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and through the Paris Climate Agreement. I think we're going to give you, again, for the people who are here for the first time, a flavor of how that system has evolved. First, before I start the first session, let me just tell you the technical details. We'll run for about an hour. We'll take a brief 15-minute break in which we have some really interesting cartoons that come from a program that we're doing for young kids, 5 to 10-year-olds in schools, featuring an amusing dodo. And then we'll take a second session running approximately 45 minutes and followed by question and answers. So the whole exercise should take a couple of hours. We hope you'll stay with us and we're looking forward to it very much. So with that, I'm going to ask my friend and colleague, Ollie Wheatcroft, the program manager at SunX Malta, who's with us today. And he's got a video recording around the subject of climate-friendly travel, and he's going to play that for us now.
Hi, I'm Ollie Wheatcroft. I'm the program manager at SunX Malta. I've been working alongside Jeffrey Lippman for the last 5 years to help to develop a climate-friendly travel framework, which was inspired by Maurice Strong, the first person to put climate change on the global agenda. This slide is all about how we are trying to help to support and engage companies and communities. And the green arrow on the diagram represents the 50-year transformation journey starting in 1972 with the UN Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment, which was the first Earth Summit. It then goes through the key milestone events in the evolution of sustainable development and climate change strategy, from the 1987 Brundtland Commission to the Rio Earth Summit and subsequent Agenda 21. Key milestone events then include the Millennium Development Goals, which subsequently was transitioned into being the Sustainable Development Goals as we now know them. And then, most importantly, in terms of the context of climate-friendly travel, the Paris 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Maurice Strong was the first person to put climate change on the global agenda and to recognise the existential nature of climate change. And the graph on the right is our critical focal point. The area in red near the bottom of the curve is where we are now, and our mission is to bend our trend to transition into the blue section onto a more sustainable pathway. Climate-friendly travel has 3 main components. It's low carbon, contributing to the sector transformation of travel and tourism. It's SDG linked, focusing on goal 13, as well as all relevant sustainable development goal interlinkages. And finally, focuses on the Paris Climate Agreement with what is now clearly a 1.5 degree target. Our climate-friendly travel framework has two main components, action and education. Within the work on action, we're spearheading through our climate-friendly travel registry for 2050 climate neutral and sustainability ambitions. This is a place where companies and communities can commit, plan and record their action programs and receive support to achieve their climate and sustainability goals. We've developed a series of support hubs focusing on innovation and best practice, strategy in the form of reports from the public and private sector, and learning through multimedia resources on climate-friendly travel. And finally, marketing through SDG 17 partner organisations, providing outreach and online visibility. Education starts in the schools with a lesson plan for teachers based around 65 cartoons featuring a friendly dodo that returns from extinction to support climate-friendly travel. Our climate-friendly travel diploma, which was launched in October of last year, 2020, and currently has 45 students from over 30 countries learning about the fundamentals of climate-friendly travel, taught by some of the leading experts across the world on climate change and tourism. Our annual Morris Strong Youth Summit and Awards, which we are proud to launch this year and hope to grow year on year as a key annual event. And finally, our plan for our kids to train 100,000 strong climate champions across all UN states by 2030. Our outreach is led through our State of the Sector annual report with the World Travel and Tourism Council. It focuses on the development of climate-friendly travel to support the transformation of companies and communities to meet their Paris 1.5 degree commitment. We work through SDG 17 partnership agreements with like-minded organisations to strengthen our capacity. For example, with WTTC within the travel and tourism sector and the Earth Council covering the sustainable development sector. All of this reflects the vision of the inspiration for SumNext, Morris Strong. We're committed to making the next 10 years the decade of climate-friendly travel. Over this period, we've set the following targets: to support 100,000 climate champions across all UN states, 10,000 companies to be supported to develop robust climate plans on the registry, 500 communities who are committed to climate-friendly travel with registered climate action plans, 1,000 climate-friendly travel diploma graduates, and 5,000 trainers working through 200 nationally sponsored climate champions programs. This is what we've called a plan for our kids, a support system for travel and tourism to meet its commitment under the Paris Climate Agreement through climate-friendly travel. Thank you.
As ever, thank you so much, Ollie. It's fair to say that without Ollie's support in SunX Malta, we wouldn't have a SunX Malta. So I'm very appreciative of what I thought was a very clear and to the point presentation. I'd like to show the slide of the targets again, if we could do that. And if we can't, yes, I think we can. Yep, it's a miracle. Here we are. And I just want to underscore this because quite recently, we've been asked by a lot of people, what is it that you're actually trying to do? There's so much noise at the moment around the climate issue leading up to the COP meeting, the Glasgow Conference of the Parties. And because it's being held in the UK, and because the UK is absolutely brilliant at putting across messages, there's been a huge increase of attention, and that's been coupled with the return of the Biden administration to the table of the Paris Agreement, which again is being reflected in quite radical proposed domestic regulations designed to shift the entire economy to a much more renewable energy focused activity. Well, when you have the UK wanting to position itself outside the EU as the global climate leader, and you have the US coming back into the international framework as one of the superpower climate leaders. And let me just segue there, along with China, because China is another leader in this field. We'll talk about that later in the course. When you have that amount of energy, and suddenly the travel and tourism sector has started to join the game. So we're going to have a travel and tourism Glasgow declaration following earlier declarations when this wasn't such a sexy subject. Back in 2003, the Gerba UNWTO climate regulation and the Davos 2007 UNWTO climate regulation. And with all these activities, a number of people have been coming to us and saying, you know, why are you doing something different? Are you doing anything different? And I think this slide tries to show the nature of our ambitions. It cuts across the whole spectrum. It's a 10-year program. We've already established a registry on Malta for climate-friendly travel companies and communities to engage with us so that we can become a filter into the broader outside travel and tourism ecosystem, into the broader climate and environmental world, which Ollie was describing in this long swoosh slide that he just showed you. And certainly this is designed, this program is designed to be very ambitious. And the critical component for people watching this presentation is the 100,000 strong climate champions across all UN states. We hope that after this week, all of you who have been with us will feel that you're empowered to become part of this community. And we, particularly with our diploma graduates, who are an invaluable element of this system, they will be country leaders of this program. We want to create a community of young people, and we want our activities in SunX Malta to be seen as a rallying point and a focal point for tomorrow's leaders and for the people who are engaged outside, sometimes quite critically, of the sector. I don't know how many people saw Greta Thunberg's speech yesterday, in which she said, we've had enough blah, 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 and now we need to act. And that's where SunX Malta is positioned as well. We have a concept. We will sign the Glasgow Declaration because it moves in the right direction. But we believe that the young people's voice is telling us, and the science is telling us, and the events on the ground, the floods in the United States, in Europe, the forest fires, all of those things that we've discussed and that you're well familiar with, they're telling us that looking just ahead to 2050 and net carbon, so you still keep the fossil fuel as a critical part of the mix, we think that's yesterday's story. And we have to be prepared, as the next generation are telling us, to add action to the declarations. And so we've set up a system which is designed to help create that action. And you can see it on this slide in front of us. And in 10 years' time, those of you who are still alive can tick box this and say yes, no, no, yes, and see if we met our own targets, which we think are quite tough. Now, with that, we're going to take a deeper look at what Ollie described as the support system that we're trying to put in place, our SDG 17 partnership. We've been writing with other interested organizations for the past few years, very simple, virtually an electronic handshake agreement between leading edge companies and thinkers in this field who are taking action that we think can be particularly helpful to companies and communities. And we signed an SDG 17 agreement, which is within the concept of the Sustainable Development Goals. SDG 17 is the one that says partnerships for change. And we have a very simple one-page template, 1.5 page. The last half page is telling both parties that settle your disputes as friends and don't ever go near lawyers. That's the best advice I can give to anybody listening to this exercise today. So our first partner is someone I'm really pleased to be working with. It's a company called RiskLayer. We have with us, and we have presentations today from its founder and CEO, Bizan Karzai. And also, to kick off, we're going to hear from the Chief Security Officer at RiskLayer, and that's Trevor Girard. And I think we have a video from Trevor, but he's also going to try to join us for the question and answer session, which we'll have after we've heard the RiskLayer presentation in full. So over to you now, Trevor, please.
So thank you, Jeffrey. My name is Trevor Girard. I'm Director of Standards at Hotel Resilient, and today I'm going to be taking you through what it means for the hotel industry to be resilient and what sort of risks and hazards they should be planning for, especially hotels and hotel managers. So what is resilience? It's really the combination of two lines of thought, although some
can I stop
just stick with this first one, which is the ability to
I just wonder, are we playing the right video? Is this Trevor's video? I could be wrong on this, but I just want to be doubly sure that we're doing it correctly. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, that's Trevor's.
Okay, my apologies. Sleeping on the job.
stand and resist. So that's really, having strong buildings, such as foundations, strong connections to withstand an earthquake, or to have seawalls to protect against a tsunami or storm surge. And this, of course, is important to stop disasters from occurring, from impacting a hotel or any business. But what's also important is the second line of thought, the ability to adapt. So this is seeing that, something is going to happen and quickly changing the way that you're operating or the services that you're being provided as a hotel or as a destination. And as well, to see that some hazards, such as flooding and drought, are changing over the long term due to climate change. So for that, in that sense, changing the way that that you operate, and again, maybe the services you provide, maybe how you provide those services and where you do. And so this ability to be strong against hazards, to resist them, but also flexible to change either as that emergency situation itself is changing, or to change over the long term as these hazards start to become either more pronounced or more dynamic. And so when we're talking about resisting, something, we're really talking about risk. So risk itself, whether it's to risk of an earthquake or flood or some other hazard, that's really made up of three components that combined create risk. So first, you need that hazard in place. So in this picture, it could be something like a typhoon, hurricane. You also need to have to be exposed to it. So a typhoon is obviously not going to impact you if it doesn't make it to where you are. So that exposure is the hotel, a destination, on the coast, exposed to that hazard. And then the hotel and destination also, for it to really impact, if that hazard is really going to impact it, it needs to be vulnerable. And so maybe the structures are not up to code, and so would be vulnerable to an earthquake. Of course, that won't happen if there is no earthquake hazard. So all three of these combined create risk. And there's really a process for managing risk, and this comes from the ISO standards on risk assessment 31000. And what's very important, of course, is that risk assessment. And the risk assessment answers these questions. So first, what can happen and why? So a tsunami maybe will be able to impact a hotel, the whole beach area surrounding hotel. So that's what can happen and why. Why is that? Is it because that those areas are, only 1 meter above sea level? So understanding what can happen and why, and what, of course, are the consequences. So there may be flooding, but that also maybe will knock out power. It maybe will block off some roads in the greater region, depending on the hazard. It could knock out whole transportation systems. The airports could be closed. It could shut down water and sanitation services, electricity, communications, even food and supplies could be cut off. So really understanding the greater, impacts of each individual hazard. And what is the probability of occurrence? And this is really where disaster models come in place. And we also do this with our parent company, RiskLayer. We model these different hazards at a destination level. And what factors then could mitigate or reduce the risk? So maybe an earthquake is likely to occur, but the hotel either has structural bracing or could implement this, and same with flooding. Perhaps there is a seawall, or perhaps a seawall could be put in place. So understanding either what is in place and then needs to be maintained, or what could be put in place to either stop this, the risk of something occurring, or if it cannot be stopped from occurring, at least reducing the impact. And so looking at impact, just for a single hazard, such as a cyclone, can have multiple impacts. You may have, of course, heavy and strong winds, rain. You may have mudslides as soils get saturated. You could have then flooding, which could also lead to knocking out power systems, communications within the hotel itself. It may be then not able to get any supplies. So within the hotel, there could be no food delivery, no water if that service is knocked out. Even simple things as accessing the rooms. If electric system is knocked out, maybe these key cards won't work anymore, and either rooms will not be able to be accessed, or if they're easily accessed because nothing works, then this could be a security issue. And yeah, airports could be closed, transportation systems. So there's just multiple impacts from a single hazard. And so this is what hotel then, a destination needs to do is really understand, okay, for each hazard, what are the potential impacts? And there's many, and some could even lead to others. So a windstorm could lead to a fire if it creates some damage to a electric grid, as well as fire can lead to building collapse. Earthquake could lead to a landslide. So there's really multiple ways that each hazard can either create impacts itself or lead to secondary hazards. And so this is why we really started, and back in 2016 with this project with PATA, with UNDRR, with GIZ and GIDRM to create these standards that look at multi-hazard and that are really for the globe, for use anywhere in the world. And they are really the only global standards on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, specifically for hotels. And so they're multi-hazard. They look at all hazards that can take place. We also included pandemics in there, and we have looked at all these hazards with what we call the hotel resilient framework. And so we are always then looking at these three areas for a hotel. So the site, which is taking into account the actual hazards on site, as well as how the building and the building components interact with that hazard to either create a more vulnerable situation or to make it more resilient if it actually is built and located in a way that reduces the risk of that hazard causing impact. And we look at the systems in place, so the emergency systems, fire extinguishers, fire suppression systems, evacuation systems, egress routes, warning systems, and as well as the management policies that are implemented at the hotel. So how that hotel communicates with either the occupants, the guests, or the greater community, or with fire services, police, once they are in an emergency situation, as well as what their preparedness is like. Do they have systems in place, as in like an incident command system to deal with the emergency? And then what are the recovery systems, like getting into business continuity? So if something does impact them, how likely are they, and what do they have in place to build back better, to get back to operating in the quickest way and safest way possible? And so we really take a risk-based approach. And so we, at our parent company RiskLayer, we calculate the risk of for the whole globe for these different hazards, and we provide this as a tool to hotels that they can go into our software and see at their location. After they put in their geographic information, they can see what the risk is, and then it also takes into account some of their building components. And so with that, it's provides hotels with a great place to start. They can see what their risks are before they really start improving their plans. So they understand that they have, in this situation, in Baden-Baden in Germany, there is a flood risk. So they know that there's certain mitigation that they can do to prevent against flooding. That is more important than, of course, in this case, tsunami risk, which is 0. And so just to take you through some examples of the criteria that are in our standards, and just more in a picture format, so it's maybe quickly easier to comprehend than, line by line text of our standards, just to give you an idea. So starting with the foundation, it's very important to know, especially for earthquake, how strong that structure is. So something on stilts would be a lot more susceptible to an earthquake than a slab on grade construction. Same with the building shape. A more regular footprint is better designed against earthquakes than an asymmetric building. And different building components. So is the balconies and overhangs properly secured to the structure? Is the roof secured to the walls? Are there coverings of shutters for the windows to prevent against windborne debris damage? And are the windows themselves with safety glass, or if not, then potentially the shards of glass could hurt people in a windstorm or an earthquake? And egress routes, are they well lit? Is there handrails as opposed to unlit, slippery, and dark emergency egress routes? And exit signage as well. Is it consistent? Is it well lit? And does it make sense? The one on the right showing consistent signage that's easy to understand, as opposed to on the left, which could confuse people if a variety of signs are used in the same building. And safe assembly points, are they in place? Are there clear safe assembly points and signage to get to them? And do they accommodate the different types of guests that the hotel will have? And the roles and responsibilities. So does the hotel have a sort of disaster management system? At least, are there clear roles if an emergency occurs? Who should be doing what? It doesn't have to be a full-on disaster management system with a EOC, but still the staff should be made aware of what it is they need to do if something does occur, and there should be a list of the different tasks that they should be doing, so that they don't have to start making it up and doing it ad hoc as the event occurs, having it on paper. And of course, are those steps and tasks associated to the individual hazard, because they will be different in every hazard. So for an earthquake, there will be different steps that should be occurring, of course, after an earthquake occurs. There'll be different steps, and they'll be taken by the different staff, and this will change for each hazard. So for a typhoon, you'll see it be completely different, because the typhoon you can actually plan for, and so these are more preparedness functions, whereas with an earthquake, it really can only be response. And are there protocols in place to look at that actually address the different hotel areas? So for instance, for evacuating these different areas, it'll change for parking garage to a swimming pool area. And how will you communicate with these areas? Are there speakers everywhere? Will you send staff to those areas? Are there cameras in those areas that you can check to see if there's anyone? So there's different ways of evacuating different areas of a hotel. And similarly, there should be different protocols for different scenarios. So if an earthquake occurs and it's pouring rain outside, will that change people's likelihood to go outside? Will you have to try to enforce that more? Will you need to provide even simply umbrellas or tarps? Will the electric grid be down? And if so, will that affect communications and power and lighting at night especially? And is there any big event going on, some festival, which you'll have a lot more people on your property who are not necessarily from the hotel? Similarly with a wedding, how will you do it during these types of events or during high tourist season? And so at the end of going through our standards and doing our audit online, the hotel's provided with an audit report that really takes them through and shows them their resilience score, shows them how, their ability to improve their score. There are a number of criteria that every hotel could improve. There are some that they can't, such as hazards. They can't change the actual hazard score of an earthquake, but they could change how they respond and their management system and the different response systems that they have in place, as well as their score for each risk to each hazard. So they can see what is the score, they can see which they should be focusing on. And we feel that's very important, and it creates a great baseline for a hotel to start off in their improvement goal. And finally, just to show you, this is a new PATA resilience framework that we've been working with PATA on a project called Destination Tourism Resilience, where we are developing a set of e-learning for hotels, and there's 10 modules altogether, looking at how hotels and how destinations specifically can learn about risk assessments, can learn about how they can improve their capacity to plan for emergencies and to respond accordingly. And in this resilience framework, what's key is that it's really going beyond resilience, although in reality, what it's doing is it's saying that resilience should not just be looking at the ability to adapt and withstand natural hazards, but it should also incorporate sustainability and social responsibility. So together with PATA, we are also saying that for a hotel to be resilient, it should really, it should not only withstand and adapt to hazards, but it should be sustainable in the long term, meaning that it does not impact its environment in a negative way, and in fact should be having a positive impact on the environment. And then of course it should be working with the community to ensure that it doesn't have any negative community impacts, and so should be definitely following any kind of policy on, say, on child labor, on forced labor, so to be making sure that it's operating in a way that is being socially responsible. And on this new resilience framework, my colleague Bijan will get into a bit more, and so on that I will leave it, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trevor. It's a terrific program and so clearly presented. And I think it, often in this sector, we talk only at the really top level. I don't mean that in terms of the intellectual top level, but the level that people can grasp the most. And you don't understand that underneath this, there's a whole set of processes and procedures which must be taken if you're going to achieve what you say you're going to achieve at the top level. And the best example I can give, I saw recently that for an airplane to take off, there are something like 6 million different procedures which have to be undertaken in order to get to the stage where the plane can take off. The manufacturing procedures, the operational procedures from the airport, the in-flight procedures, and incredible number of protocols that really dedicated people have been knitting together for years and years that allow this plane to be certified, to be able to operate, to be able to work on a global aviation navigation system. And we take it for granted because it's too detailed, it's too complex, and somebody else is doing it. And I think what we've just heard from Trevor is some measure of that detail, but in a very, very structured and organized way that someone like me, who is not an expert in this field, can look at it and nod and say, yeah, that makes sense. So I thank you for that. And just now to give you an additional dose of what RiskLayer are doing and why we're so pleased and proud to have them as a partner at SunX Malta, we're going to ask Bijan Karzai, who is really the founder and brains behind this system, to amplify a little bit on what Trevor has said, and particularly talk about how we're going to bring the climate-friendly dimension into this essentially sustainability structured system that has been created by RiskLayer. So Bijan, over to you.
My name is Bijan Kazai. I'm the CEO of Hotel Resilient, and I'd like to talk to you today about our collaboration with Sunex Malta on the climate-friendly travel program. So one of the problems for travelers is that confidence in green and climate-friendly advertising is at an all-time low. Information on sustainability, climate-friendly travel is often not transparent. It's scattered across different types of social media, website, and information is not comparable across different properties, across different tourism companies. Different metrics are used. It's not clear and concise. At the same time, companies have a problem because they're being required to, according to the latest G7 meeting of finance ministers, climate-related financial disclosures will be mandatory to qualify for investments. And assessing climate risk, developing climate resilience and recovery plans is complex, difficult, and it's expensive. So companies want to disclose their climate risks in a way that is cost-effective, easy to do, and uses the latest science and credible information. And this is where technology-enabled solutions help. And this is where we have developed solutions at Hotel Resilient. And one of the first things that we want to do is to be able to consolidate all your climate-friendly and climate resilience information in a uniform and comparable way. And then to help showcase that all the different types of climate mitigation, climate resilience actions for travelers in a comparable and concise way. Tour operators want to see, for example, what tourism businesses are complying with responsible guidelines, with climate-friendly criteria, and they want to look at that in a comparable and clear, concise way. Investors want to get this information using credible metrics. So we're trying to connect the different types of stakeholders here across one standard. And ultimately, the idea is to communicate this information to the traveler. And there you need verification, third-party certification. You need someone else to look over the information that's being submitted and ensuring that it goes beyond a self-assessment and a self-declaration. So Trevor Gerard, my colleague, presented to you earlier the Hotel Resilience Standards, and he talked mainly about the dimension on natural disasters and crisis resiliency. So that's the main pillar where we developed our standards out of. And along that domain, there's also two other areas that when we say a company is resilient, it has to also look at. And one of those is climate friendly criteria. So we're not just looking at the climate risk and mitigation of that risk component, which is covered with the climate change management protocols and the climate risk analytics, but we're also looking at what type of climate resilience and climate friendly action is a tourism business taking in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy, and so forth. And finally, there's a dimension of responsible, environmentally and social responsible type of criteria that have been added to ensure that a company that is stating it's resilient is also socially, environmentally responsible. So for the crisis resilient, the first thing that we do is we offer a free baseline risk and resilience assessment. This essentially evaluates the property across different types of hazards and impacts of climate change, and provides a risk score. And that's the basis then of actually coming up with a disaster risk management climate change adaptation plan based on that baseline assessment, which is the next step into this process. And then ultimately developing hazard specific type of actions that are all provided for through specific audits on floods, storms, earthquakes, tsunamis. So wherever we see, for example, in this example here, flooding is an issue, then the property should look at flood protection measures, and that audit informs then of what can be done in order to reduce the risks and enhance resiliency to floods. Then the next set of audits are looking at climate resiliency. And as I mentioned, we're looking at both mitigation side, and this is based on the TCFD framework for reporting climate recovery and resilience plans and disclosing climate related risks in terms of metrics and targets. And on the other hand, and this is where really our collaboration is with SunX Malta, is to develop a climate neutral plan with 2050 as our goal, ultimately with zero greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, the responsible audits, as I mentioned, are looking at environmentally responsible, socially responsible criteria. And these are also developed as an audit, which is freely available on our platform in collaboration with EXO and Kiri Travel. So what happens is that a company that wants to take action and show that it's resilient first comes on the platform and conducts a risk assessment. And this could be a multi-hazard risk assessment, and including impacts of climate change. So that then is the first step into understanding what types of actions that can be undertaken in order to both reduce the risks, mitigate them, as well as different types of climate actions that can be taken to adapt and showcase how these zero greenhouse gas emissions will be met by 2050. An example of how this works is, let's say the baseline climate risk audit is completed, and one of the areas is, and this is an example for a hotel that wants to switch to a green energy supplier and wants to use renewable energies. And so they can sign up and run a free audit that essentially assesses the hotel against a number of different criteria to see if they comply with our standards that require, for example, to source at least 50% of their energy from renewable sources. And if they do that, then they can ask to get verified, submit that information. Once they're verified, this, for example, is added to their microsite. And any type of other action that's based on a verified audit is added to their microsite. So in a very transparent way, a traveler or an investor can look and see at this property and see exactly what type of resilience, climate friendly and responsible practices is that property undertaking. And that information is displayed on a microsite, which is a dedicated website hosted by our platform for that hotel. And they display the badges that they get once the verification process is completed for each one of these specialized audits that they complete. Obviously, if they don't do certain things, they are not showing this, but we want to show all the positive actions that they're taking. And a traveler might look on a map. This is Phuket as a destination and want to see what the hotel is doing. So it will display all the different types of certifications that that hotel has, as well as, again, through this system of being able to see what badges, what areas of compliance does that hotel have in terms of climate action, but also in terms of responsible hotels and resiliency. And now this can be applied to any other hotel, any other tourism business, but the example I'm showing you, which is developed for Hotel Resilient, is specifically for the accommodation sector. We're implementing this in the Asia Pacific region, and there we're collaborating with EXO and Kiri Travel, two of the leading destination management companies in the region. We're also working with hotel associations, closely working with governments, ministries of tourism, Department of Tourism in the Philippines, for example, travel associations, in this case, PATA, which helped us develop the standards in the first place. Through that collaboration we had with PATA and the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, and various hotel groups that we have been working with in certifying. Now, how exactly we want to work with Sunex Malta is on their registry, where there is different aspects of climate-friendly travel and 2050 climate neutral captured. And the idea here is to align our baseline climate assessments and advanced solutions with the elements of the registry, so that companies that register have an additional tool, and the climate risk assessment is a free tool, that they're able then to get information on their climate risks and also look at solutions to see how they can mitigate those risks through these specialized audits, as well as different types of audits where they can showcase different initiatives that they're taking to become climate friendly. All that leading into a transparent way of showing, their climate resilience plan. And there are other ways that we're looking at collaborating together. So in a more granular way, the registry has a part A and a part B. So in the part A, the registry is looking at baseline carbon neutral. That can be complemented with a baseline climate risk assessment. So we're looking at both greenhouse gas emissions on the emissions side, as well as the mitigation side with a risk assessment. And the part B, which is the advanced carbon neutral survey on the registry, can then be complemented with a climate resilience audit and a climate friendly audit. These are actions that the property or the tourism business is taking in order to showcase that it's climate resilient and climate friendly. And the idea is to make that company more visible to travelers, to investors, to tour operators. We've also discussed and talked about other ways of collaborating via e-learnings, participating in webinars such as this, and consultations through the Strategy Hub. So essentially, there are different areas of engagement that we can foresee with Sunex Malta, but our first area of collaboration, which has already started, is making available the baseline climate risk assessment and linking this closely, aligning it with the registry. And this information is provided by RiskLayer, which is our parent company. So just a few words about RiskLayer. RiskLayer essentially has a proprietary platform for multi-hazard disaster and climate risk modeling. This is modeling that is available to insurance companies, reinsurers, and it's modeled at a 10 by 10 kilometer resolution grid for the entire globe. So you can get a very disaggregated footprint, and then that's brought all the way to the property level and interacts with information that we're collecting about vulnerability of the property, of the site, and using then engineering models, we can calculate the risk. And it's based on one of the largest disaster loss databases in the world. So empirical data is used to validate the risk model values, and CatDat, which is the database, is cited across international media. It has over 1,700 citations, and this information is followed across by different types of users, politicians, media. So 43,000 followers on Twitter are looking at this information coming out of RiskLayer. And we're using this information to bring it into the analytics. So the first thing that you do is once you enter your tourism business's location, you can start looking at the hazard. You then provide some information about your property and your site, and you can get a detailed risk footprint. And then you go through our audit modules, and through those audit modules, you can then, for example, here's the distribution of COVID-19 in terms of different parameters, but you might also look at the distribution of river floods currently and with different types of climate change scenarios through the global models for 2030, 2050, and get a sense for what the increase is in terms of increase in frequency and intensity. And why this solution is unique is that often this is provided by natural catastrophe modeling companies. There's a few companies worldwide that do that, and they do it for large corporations. They do it for insurance and reinsurance companies, and very few smaller companies would be able to afford those types of models. Certification companies don't provide risk analytics at this level. There's indicators, often very qualitative indicators, that they come up with. Crisis management companies just provide generic solutions that are not risk-based. So the idea with Hotel Resilient is to combine analytics at the highest level with targeted resilience solutions that are risk-based, and then to make sure that these are tailored to the processes of the sector we're addressing. And we started with hotels. So that's the accommodation sector is the key sector that we're addressing now. But in our collaboration with SunX Malta, we're also looking at extending these types of tools that we have to other types of tourism businesses. Thank you very much for your attention. So that brings me to the end.
Wow. I thought we'd, I mean, I've been working with you on this stuff, Bijan, but sometimes you have to step back and see it all presented in the form that you've just presented it. And it just makes me really happy that we have not just a good SDG 17 partnership, but we have a good personal relationship with you and Trevor. And at the end of the day, that's probably the most important thing that will help us to scale this activity, which is basically your activity. We're a facilitator here. And, you know, we are very appreciative that the step one that we've agreed to do together is to provide, you guys will provide a free risk analysis. This is going to be really important for the smaller and the medium-sized hotels, and particularly the ones which are in the climate risk hotspots, small island, developing countries, African states. And I think we can provide a whole new set of services, which hopefully in turn will help to provide business for you, because at the end of the day, you have to pay the bills. So thank you for that. We're going to take a break now. We're going to show another one of the Dodo cartoons that I mentioned yesterday, which are being produced for young kids in school, 5 to 10-year-olds, by another one of our SDG 17 partners, and that is Earth Focus Foundation in Geneva, and Nicola Fury, who's been kind of personally running this for as long as I can remember. And I hope you find the second cartoon as entertaining as the first one. I hadn't realized that I was live, but I have here a really nice dodo with me. These guys produce these things. And back in the old days, when I was running WTTC, I was invited to address the governing council of UNEP in Nairobi. I was living in Geneva at the time, and I had one of these made that was 6 foot, and I took it with me to Nairobi and to this very, very important high-level meeting. I flew next to me on the aircraft, and we had great fun. And then on the day when we had this meeting and a lot of environment ministers sitting around the table, the governing council of UNEP has most of the important environment ministers from around the world. When it came my turn to make a presentation, I put this 6 foot dodo in the seat, and I asked the question, is this how you want people to end up? And it was a stunt, but it was a fun stunt and got a lot of attention at the time. And it was Nicola and her group that produced a dodo for me. We still talk about it. And they also have small ones this size, which I have to keep very carefully away from my dogs because they seem to be very attached to it. So we'll take the break, we'll come back, and afterwards we have a couple more presentations of SDG 17 partners, quite different from this one. And we hope it will give you a little bit of the flavor of this structure that we're trying to set up, where we find really best of breed companies. I think you've seen this from our friends at RiskLayer. And again, it's not just what you've seen on the screen, it's the computer stuff that they have behind it, the modeling that Bijan and his group do. They operate to a very high standard. And when you think about it, if you're a small hotel and suddenly you find that you're getting typhoons or hurricanes, a Caribbean island, for example, and you can see a measure of the risk thanks to their structure, and you can also see methodologies as to how you can respond to that risk, that can be incredibly useful to you. So Trevor and Bijan, I think I've seen from the chat, people have appreciated this. We don't want this to be too overbearing and demanding on you. So enjoy the dodo for the next 15 minutes and hopefully come back.
Yeah. Now you can put your same picture.
Dodo, come back. I can dodo do this. Dodo, come back. I can dodo do that. Dodo, come back. But I wanna see what you can do. You know it's all I do. Dodo, come back.
Who put this tree in the middle of the path?
What's this? A car boot sale?
It's a beautiful day, perfect for going to the beach.
And you need all that to go to the beach?
Well, you know how it is. We always need things we forget, don't we?
At this rate, it'll be a midnight swim.
Well, you've got a point there. I better leave some of this stuff behind. But what to leave? The flippers, the rubber ring.
What are those for? Are you going mining?
Oh, they're in case I want to build a sandcastle.
Oh, yes, sandcastles.
Oh, well, nice idea. Bye-bye, sandcastles. Right, what shall I do now? It's too early to go swimming. I'll start by sunbathing. I need a bit of sun. And then I'll eat. Exercise gives you an appetite. This is the life. What's he doing? He's got engine trouble. He's going to drown if he's not careful. Don't panic! I'm coming! Help! Ah! Help! I can't swim! Help! Dear me, that chap seems to be in a spot of bother. Hey, put me down! Put me down, I can't fly!
Roger, dear boy, if you say so.
Oi, I didn't ask to be dropped in this rubbish dump. But this rubbish is yours, dear boy. I was watching you from up there. What a cheek. Ah, it's you. And to think I was trying to save you. Well, that was very kind of you, but hadn't you better think about keeping this beach clean? I live here, if you hadn't noticed. But it wasn't me who did that. Well, who else did it then? And in less than an hour, too. You're right. It's one of my sandwiches. I recognize it. Oh, shame. I was going to bury everything, you know how it is. I see you know nothing about beach maintenance. You need a lesson, my dear boy. Now, pay attention. To lie on golden sands and offer their bodies to the gentle caresses of the sun has become the favorite sport of millions and millions of people all over the world. That's all very well, but it does cause some serious problems. Beaches weren't designed to cope with so many people. Their ecological balance is precarious. Many of the people who use them don't understand that the rubbish they leave behind won't just disappear into thin air. Someone has to clear up the plastic bottles and drink cans they leave behind. It's a mess. In fact, some cities just dump their rubbish on beaches instead of treating it properly. Unbelievable! Humans must be nuts! You bet. And it's going to get worse. Tourists travel all over the world to visit beaches, and they're getting really crowded. Just think about this. Every time a new hotel is built on a beach, all the rubbish and waste has to go somewhere. Unfortunately, it doesn't always end up in controlled dumps, but on the beaches where people have holidays. It's bad for everybody's health, too. So we must be very careful if we want to have fun in the future. It's daft, the mistakes we make through pure ignorance, isn't it? If we take the trouble to put rubbish bins along the beach, people should take the trouble to put their rubbish in them. It's a little thing, but it's important. Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. Don't worry. I understand. It's just that I didn't know. I didn't know. You can rely on me to remind you if you ever forget. A rub-a-dub-dub, 3 turtles in the tub. Hoovard and who do you... what's happening? It's blocked. The whole system obviously needs a complete overhaul. I see, that goes there, and shower, basin. Eureka! I've got it!
Rivet? Rivet?
What rivet?
No, I was just going rivet. I wasn't talking to you.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
Rivet? Rivet? What is it? What is it?
Yes, quite. Rivet, rivet. Cool, it works. I'm a genius plumber. Well, may as well get some washing up done. Yeah. Yes? Very clever. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got better things to do than watch you blowing bubbles.
What?
Listen, I'm doing the washing up.
No, wait a minute. You've just connected your drain to my pond.
Yeah, so what? What's the problem? I'm only getting rid of my dirty water.
The pond is my home.
You're not going to make a fuss about a few bubbles, are you?
But it's not the bubbles, it's the detergent. Don't you know that stuff's dangerous? It kills everything.
No, it says here that it only kills microbes and bacteria. Oh, no. I've got your hiccups. Oh. Right, that's it. Ah, that's the best cure for hiccups. You should try it.
Oh, that's better. Where was I? Yes, detergent. Don't you know how dangerous it is to pour polluted water just anywhere?
No.
I'll show you. Oh, excuse me. For a long time, people just took water for granted. Then they realized that, in fact, it's a very precious resource and a major cause of inequality. Every single day, millions of African women have to walk miles and miles to draw water from what are more often than not polluted wells. Westernized societies consume frightening quantities of water, and the richer a country, the more waste it produces. Sewage and detergent all get mixed up in the water supply, which has to be purified in huge treatment plants to make it drinkable again.
That's appalling!
But domestic pollution is nothing compared to what industry produces. For decades, the big corporations have cheerfully dumped their dirty waste in our rivers and their chemical effluent wherever they fancy. All non-degradable waste ends up in our water eventually. Even if we bury it, the rain washes it into the supply. Water is health and life. If we don't learn how to respect it, it's bye-bye to our beautiful blue planet.
And I was so proud of my new drainage system.
Rivet, it was a great piece of DIY.
But I put nature in danger. I'm a complete hick.
Are your hiccups coming back?
No, I'm okay. Anyway, thanks for teaching me something I didn't know.
Hooky crooky, you're welcome. Rivet. 1, 2, 3.
What's this? Another invention?
Oh, it's you.
1, 2, 3. Breathe out. I'm learning how to swim. Since I'm a bird that can't fly, and I practically drown every time I go near water, I thought I'd do something about it.
Breathe in.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I see. You're going to annoy the fish.
Oh, not at all. I'm going to explore the seabed. I visited it the other day with my friend the dolphin, and I found it very beautiful, so I'm going back there this afternoon.
Well, good luck. And whatever you do, don't forget, breathe in.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, breathe out. Hello. 1, 2, 3, breathe out. Oars. Oars. Where the hell am I? Right. This is getting me nowhere. Time to try something else. It works! That looks good. Wow, a boat. Let's go and take a look. There might be some treasure on board. Oh, splinters. Don't they ever do any cleaning around here? That's dangerous.
Excuse me?
Are you talking to me?
What are you doing?
What does it look like?
Have you got a permit to do that?
A permit to do what?
Collect coral.
I'm not collecting, I'm cleaning.
Oh, it's forbidden to collect coral. You're putting everyone who lives here in great danger. The little fish, the anemones, the sea urchins, me. We depend on coral, didn't you know?
No.
If you have a moment, I'll tell you all about it.
Go on.
Coral is made by polyps, tiny little animals which live in warm, shallow waters. They attach themselves to underwater rocks and cover themselves with a hard limestone shell. In time, they form a coral reef. Their tissue contains algae which use sunlight to produce nutrients. It's these algae which give coral its fabulous colours.
Superb.
The coral reef is home to a fantastic range of plant and wildlife. Sometimes the tenants' demands threaten the coral, but of course it's man who's the real danger.
As usual.
'Cause the coral reef is one big nature reserve. It forms a natural barrier against storms and tidal waves, but maybe not for much longer. Of the 110 states which have coral areas, 93 are watching them disappear. Why? The usual reasons. Damage from fishing, pollution, neglect and tourism, and the incomparable beauty of this ocean gold which humans have used to adorn themselves since the world began. Despite strict legislation, divers are still looting the reef and selling their plunder to jewelers. Colour and life are draining from our seas, and what took millions of years to create may, if the looting isn't stopped, be wiped off the face of the earth in less than 2 centuries.
Excuse me. I've got to go and get some air.
Oh, there you are, dear boy. You were down there for ages.
I was chatting to an eel. She was telling me all about coral.
Well, dear boy, you live and learn.
Oh, I've been up to here with Africa. I want to go home. I've been trekking for days now. Heaven knows how far I've come. Oh! What's that? Savannah City. A town! I'm saved! A drink, a meal, a kip, and an airline ticket. Now that's civilization. Only trouble is, I don't have a cent on me. Over there! Bingo! Good day, I'm Dodo from Mauritius. I'm lost, I don't have a cent on me. If you lend me some money, I'll pay you back as soon as I get home.
Do you have an account with us?
No.
So sorry, we only lend to people who have money deposited with us.
That's daft. If they've got money with you, then they don't need to borrow any.
I'm sorry, no account, no loan, that's the rules.
Listen, I'm a very rare bird. Fetch me the manager.
Smith, Whistson, show the gentleman out.
Louts, hooligans, thugs.
Excuse me?
Ruffians, pocket fluff. Yeah, what do you want? What do you want?
So you're a rare bird?
Very rare. The last dodo in the universe.
I see. And you need money, am I correct?
Yes, to get home.
It would be an honor.
Well, we've put an end to the dodo for the moment, temporarily, I may say, because he'll come back again tomorrow and on Friday. But we know that time is moving on, and we're very pleased that most of the people who've registered with us today are still with us, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're going to go into another session, and this one is involving another really great initiative. It's a company which has been created within the framework of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, another one of the many alphabet organizations, in the travel and tourism sector. And the Adventure Travel Trade Association have created an initiative called Tomorrow's Air. And the driving force behind this is a lady who lives out in Oregon or somewhere on the west coast of the United States, Christina Beekman. And she is, as far as I can see, almost single-handedly advancing this very clever system for carbon capture. I'm not going to say any more because we have a video from Christina which explains all of this. And we have other offset companies involved in our SDG 17 partnerships. We have a company called Trees for Travel, and their whole positioning, which is quite different from what you're about to see, is that if you travel, no matter which of the activities you undertake, whether it's the flight, the hotel, your restaurant activity, they provide a very simple app that you can go into, make a quick calculation of what your carbon impact is, and they have a very visual and engaged system for people to purchase the equivalent amount of carbon in return for their planting of trees. And I've just mentioned this to you to show you that there are different approaches to offsets. And as I'm sure many of you will have followed, there's a huge academic discussion. So many academic discussions are huge, by the way, but there's a huge academic discussion about the real value of offsets. What happens if they agree to plant a forest and there's a fire and the forest gets burned down, so the carbon that they'd calculated doesn't happen, and you've paid for your offset and it doesn't happen, etc. And a whole raft of very detailed analyses of exact measured impacts of the offsetting. Now, I've taken part in these discussions, and the position that we've taken at SunX Malta is any realistic analysis of what's going on in the governance world, whether it's not just in the UN, which is not the true governance is at the national level. Governments are talking only now about net zero. And that net zero assumes, in my view, wrongly, that you will be able to continue polluting, but you will take certain actions which mitigate, which impact positively against the carbon that you're creating. And hence the work that you're going to hear about from Christina and from Trees for Travel and from similar organizations. And looking at this framework, which Ollie described at the beginning, the 2030 timeframe for the SDGs and the 2050 timeframe for the Paris Agreement to become effective, we've taken a position that says, okay, between now and 2030, you've got 10 years. We understand the fossil fuel companies are still going to be operating. We don't understand why anybody should put subsidies to them, these big rich companies, to get subsidies for prospecting for some new polluting fuel, which at the same time, another arm of government is saying, you can't do this. It's just illogical, but it's there, it's in the system. And you have very good committed companies like the ones I've been talking about and we're about to hear. So our position is, look, we're going to work with you guys for the next 10 years. That should be a nice time frame for you to develop your business. If it happens that that gets to stay, this system of net measurement, we'll live with that, because that's what the governance framework is telling us. But if, as we believe, the situation changes adversely between now and 2030, and the young generation become more of the decision makers, and the adverse weather creates more dramatic situations and leading to large numbers of climate refugees, millions and millions of climate refugees, it could well be that governments have to move a lot further, a lot faster. And so we'll reassess the situation in 2030, or those people who'll still be around will do that. And in the meantime, we're going to be happily collaborating with people like Tomorrow's Air. Take a look at what Christina has to say.
Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome. My name is Christina Beckman. I am very happy to be here today to share an introduction to Tomorrow's Air. I'm calling in from San Francisco, California, and I always welcome email and questions. You can find me on LinkedIn or email me, Christina@tomorrowsair.com. All right, let's get started. I have some slides to share. If I can share those. I'm doing that. Okay, so a little background. I think it's good to start with a little bit about who you're listening to. I am a former management consultant. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and went to college on the East Coast of the United States and spent many years working as a management consultant with national governments and large businesses. I had an incredible epiphany in nature that caused me to repoint that experience to nature and adventure tourism and explore the ways that nature and sustainable travel can be used as a way to alleviate poverty and further our conservation goals. So the last many years I've been focused on tourism. I'm the vice president for global strategy at the Adventure Travel Trade Association. And I'm also a co-founder at Tomorrow's Air. And this is my son, Jack. I include him here because, you know, when we sort of take away, when we strip everything away, what's the reason for our work? Why are we working? Why are we working in climate? Why do you care about climate? Well, probably at the root of that is love. Love for people in your life, love for places that are special to you. And that's always the driving force, I think, in anything we do, is the things that we love. So I'm certainly very motivated by my family and by this little guy. He's 7 now. It's an old picture. So let's get started. Tomorrow's Air was born in Antarctica. I had the extreme good fortune to be there in 2018 on an expedition that brought together scientists and activists, also artists, business people, on an expedition focused on climate learning and on networking. The idea was you're here, you're learning, you're having this incredible experience of a very pristine and distinctive place, and experiencing firsthand what it means to contemplate the melting of all this ice, what that does to the world. I'm wearing this 2041 hat. That is also really significant. That's the year the Antarctic Treaty expires or comes up for renegotiation. This has been a deep passion of Robert Swan. He is the first person to walk to the North and South Poles. He says the first person stupid enough to do that. He's made it his life's mission to activate a global climate core. And he's certainly done that. It was on this expedition where I met Nim de Swart, my co-founder. She is based in Australia. So we launched Tomorrow's Air in July of 2020 in kind of the peak of the pandemic. We'd been laying the groundwork for it well before that, however, so that allowed us to go forward despite the pandemic. So one of the, the big learnings for me in recent years has been the understanding that we now have so much carbon dioxide stored in our atmosphere that even if all emissions stop today, if everything just magically halted, it would still take hundreds to thousands of years for our natural systems to process all that CO2. So we know now that this climate crisis is so present that inaction is actually detrimental to businesses. This slide is talking about destinations. But if you're a business, it's not just like something that you think is nice to have anymore. It's necessary, and you can't kick the can down the street anymore. But it's also a great opportunity, and it's engaging in meaningful climate action can it can feel like a burden, or you can spin it around and see it as an incredible opportunity. And in travel and tourism, we certainly do have an incredible opportunity. I'll say more about that, but as travelers, as businesses, we are on top of an awesome moment, a moment for leadership and positive change. So I'll share more. So here's our vision. We imagine a world where consumers are empowered and confident in taking meaningful action for their planet's future, for climate, where corporate communities are likewise enabled to empower a climate conscious community, and where ultimately the carbon impacts of travel could be automatically accounted for and embedded into all products, benefiting all of society. So we see ourselves as at the start of a journey to catalyze a carbon-free travel ecosystem. So where we are today, we are educating and mobilizing a global collective to remove and permanently store travel's contribution of carbon dioxide emissions. And that global collective then, as you might imagine, includes travelers, businesses, and destinations, as well as businesses. So not just tourism experience providers, but anyone who sells products and services in travel has a role to play here. We are incubated by the Adventure Travel Trade Association. As I mentioned, I'm a vice president there focused on strategy. The ATTA is the largest network for adventure travel. We have nearly 30,000 individuals representing businesses, tourism boards, media, and guides, a very, very values-driven organization. We've always had sustainability at the heart. The entrepreneurs in our community establish their businesses in many cases to promote conservation, to celebrate local cultures. They have that motivation at the core of their business. Tomorrow's Air is a new brand within the ATTA, and we're leveraging the sterling reputation of this community as well as the passion of this community to help get liftoff for carbon removal. So we saw a problem. I'm sure you've all seen this problem. Travel lacks a unified approach to meaningful climate action. We know that we are a significant contributor to carbon dioxide emissions, 8%. And while many different entities are generating these emissions, we don't have one place that serves the cleanup of all these emissions. Travelers, of course, are sort of at the heart of the system, but really don't have a whole lot of leverage in terms of driving impact. So it appears that we need a place to come together. We also noticed that government-led and corporate climate strategies have not matured quick enough with the intensity of the climate crisis. So there is certainly a whole portfolio of carbon mitigation options available. You may have heard and are familiar with different kinds of offsets: forestry offsets, renewable energy, regenerative agriculture. All these things have many benefits for climate and co-benefits for people. However, they cannot solve this problem alone. And now we know that we need more, we need to incorporate some innovative climate actions as well. So for example, as I'm very focused on, solutions that provide permanent carbon dioxide storage and can accelerate the pace at which we are cleaning up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I want to talk a little bit here about carbon removal. There are so many terms in this category, and it's very easy to get muddled and confused, especially if your day-to-day life is not focused on it. So carbon removal is any technique that takes carbon out of the air and stores it. And one way to understand the range of options is to differentiate them based on their carbon dioxide storage capabilities. So on the one side of this chart, you see the image of the wind generators, renewable clean cook stoves, renewable energy and clean cook stoves are helpful. Of course, they're better than fossil fuel burning mechanisms, but they don't offer any carbon storage. They're not really taking carbon out of the atmosphere and helping us solve this problem of stored CO2. Organic farming is terrific, and we do store CO2 in soil, definitely. This is short-lived and also hard to quantify precisely. There are many other reasons to engage in organic farming, not just the climate impacts. So I'm in favor of all of these things. I'm sort of setting the stage, though, that when it comes to solving climate and handling this excess CO2 in the atmosphere, we need more than just these mechanisms. So trees, I want to talk a little bit about protecting trees. Afforestation, reforestation, protecting forested areas. This is so powerful and so important. Trees absorb and store carbon. I read something that, mature forests in an old growth mature tree, you're looking at carbon storage can be 500 years. This is very, very powerful. Also, we know, of course, that trees require protection. They require political will. And as we live in a warmed world already, we do lose forests every year to wildfires. I live here in California, and this is, if you've watched the news, you know that, or Australia, where our co-founder Nim is from, we know that fires are consuming a lot of our forests. So another wonderful thing to include when we're thinking about ways to restore our climate, and also not a full solution. So now we get to the end of the row here, where we think about carbon removal using negative emissions technologies such as direct air capture. I'll talk more in depth about how direct air capture works. In this context, the thing to understand is that carbon removed from the atmosphere through direct air capture can be permanently stored underground in basaltic rock formations. So that is sort of the span, the portfolio of options that we can be thinking about, should be thinking about when we're thinking of taking climate action. So Tomorrow's Air then offers affordable carbon removal with permanent storage. We offer this to individuals, to companies and destinations, and a key piece of how we pull all this together and are growing the community is through accessible and fun inspiration and education. So for example, we have a online virtual experience called Pull Carbon Dioxide from the Air, where you can take a virtual tour of Climeworks, and I'm going to say more about them, of their pilot facility in Hinwil, Switzerland. They have now a larger facility running on geothermal energy outside of Reykjavik in Iceland. But this pilot plant you can see in Hinwil, and Anna climbs all around it. We field questions from people all over the world. This is an example of the kind of climate education and climate action education we think is going to really help build us towards faster results. There's only so many among us who can really tuck into an IPCC report and really know what to do with that. So we are trying to bring about a more accessible way to understand climate action. So Tomorrow's Air also includes a curated community of travel benefits providers. So when you subscribe as an individual member, you remove CO2 and you also gain access to special savings, special offers from this curated community of sustainable travel providers. So this, I think, is a really interesting from the perspective of motivation. We know that humans have a hard time planning or making decisions that are for benefits that are well off in the future. And even though climate is such an existential crisis, we still have a hard time making the moves that we need when the benefits are in the future. So the benefits community we've put together on Tomorrow's Air gives travelers and companies some immediate benefits. So if you're a traveler, you're also getting the immediate benefit of access to a curated set of products and services that hopefully you find desirable. If you are a business, you get the chance to market yourself towards high-value consumers, who hopefully are interested in your products and will transact with you because you are part of this community, because they share your values, they like that you're removing CO2, and they like, of course, receiving some savings today. So this aspect of Tomorrow's Air is nascent at the moment, but we're building this and we see this as an important component of the overall vision. Let me talk briefly about the carbon removal technology that powers Tomorrow's Air. Our partner in this is Climeworks. They are the leading carbon removal provider. It's a Swiss company, as I mentioned. So the way this works, carbon collectors, they're the size of a small car. They pull air in through a fan. There's a highly selective filter material within the collector. The carbon dioxide molecules adhere to that. Everything else passes out. Once that filter is saturated, they close the collector and turn up the heat, and pure concentrated CO2 is released from the filter. And then, because we had all this conversation about storage, and then we store it. So this graphic here shows you the facility, and then what happens with that pure CO2 is it's mixed with water and then injected deep underground into basaltic rock formations. You can see this drill core that one of my friends is holding in his hand. We had the Climeworks guys at an Adventure Travel Trade Association World Summit in 2019. They brought this core. Those little white flecks are the crystallized carbon dioxide. You might also be asking at this point, oh, it sounds like you're using a lot of energy to power these machines. Are you confident that you are removing more CO2 than you're generating? And yes, we certainly are. This is powered by geothermal energy in Iceland, and it's been tested and audited. It's 90% efficient. So much, much more CO2 is being captured than is being generated in the process. I want to point out that this method is measurable and totally transparent. So through this partnership, we can measure the entire process through a flow meter. This is really helpful, especially at this stage, I think, in the evolution of business and consumer acceptance of climate action methods, because there has been confusion around different kinds of carbon offsetting, because we have had bad actors when it comes to certain solutions that people have paid money for in good faith. There's, with a tree, it can be hard to judge how much CO2 is being stored within that tree and for how long. This is not a knock on trees. I'm an incredible fan of trees. This is just acknowledging that this is sort of a different opportunity that we have here. So ultimately, we'd like to see investment in nature-based solutions and technological solutions, such as we're offering here, as part of an overall portfolio to help restore our climate. We leverage travel and art and storytelling. So a key piece of our strategy, I've sort of explained the platform and how people can engage. Travelers can purchase subscriptions, memberships. Companies and destinations can partner with us for larger CO2 removal and broader educational campaigns. One of the ways that we are promoting our messaging is really take advantage of the inspiration and the passion that travelers have and that we all have for exploration. So we are embedding climate and carbon removal messages along with travel travel marketing. And we also have this component called Artists for Air. We are growing a global community of artists, graphic artists, and photographers and videographers. I was just speaking recently with a performance artist, anyone who is in the art world and is willing to align their work with a carbon removal message. Art really gives us a visual language, an emotional way of processing climate messages. So that's a really important piece of our strategy is building out our Artists for Air and being creative with the education. So our stories are also amplified through the Adventure Travel Trade Association. If you're a business or a destination, this can be a powerful benefit also to participating in Tomorrow's Air. ATTA is a very established organization, multiple channels. Adventure.travel is also in there that speaks to adventure travelers. I encourage you to look up the Adventure Travel Trade Association and find them on social. Let's see what else I have. Stuck. All right. Oh, I'm bragging here. I'm sharing some press. So I think from a traveler perspective or a business perspective, you could say that the moment we're sort of in a very frothy moment where travelers are craving climate solutions. There was a global study you might have seen through the UNDP. It was the largest survey ever done. I think they had 1.2 million respondents, where more than half of global respondents said climate was a top concern. We are really proud to have reputable outlets like National Geographic and the New York Times spotlighting our offering. We also recently won the visionary category of Newsweek's Future of Travel Awards. So while it might have felt a little bit radical in the recent past to be convening a collective for climate and for carbon removal, it is actually feeling like something that is inevitable and is asked for. So finally, in closing, we are uniting consumers and trade. We're providing tangible and measurable carbon removal with permanent storage. We have an offering specific for travelers, uniting technology along with travel and storytelling style education. At the heart of this is amplifying the actions of an individual. Carbon removal with permanent storage is expensive right now. As the demand increases, as we deploy more of this technology, its efficiencies will increase and its costs will come down. No single entity could solve this on their own. We really do all have to come together to chip in. And that's it. When we band together, we are powerful. I encourage you and hope you will follow on Tomorrow's Air. And of course, if you have questions or comments, please reach out. I am Christina at tomorrowsair.com. My co-founder, Nim de Swart, hello at nimdeswart.com. And of course, Casey Hanisco, who is the president of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and also a key member of our team, helping us bring this into life, into greater life. All right. Thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to staying in touch. I have to figure.
So there you have it, Tomorrow's Air. And as I said, if you interact with us at www.thesunprogram.com, as we hope you will, you'll be able to see the other company that I mentioned, Trees for Travel, which takes quite a different approach, but heading in the same direction with the same goals. Now, a last presentation, and one that I'm particularly happy to share with you. It's because it's near and dear to my heart. For many years, I've been involved with an organization called ICTP, which has been built up with my friend Jürgen Steinmetz, who is the editor and owner of eTurbo News and more recently the World Tourism Network. And we've had quite a difficulty. ICTP is a membership organization for companies, for communities, for destination management, and it's always been focused on green issues, on green growth particularly. It emerged in this direction after a couple of books I'd been involved in co-authoring on green growth and travelism, the travel and tourism mix. But somehow, maybe we're people who were involved in it are either not commercial enough or not business oriented enough. It kind of chugged along with 1,000 members around the world, and we decided to reinvent it, to bring it into what Christina was talking about, really, the great debate on climate. I focused on that. It's all that we focus on at SunX. And I think my friend Thomas, who's a very media savvy guy, he realizes now that climate is the defining issue. So on World Tourism Day, we relaunched ICTP as a new collaboration, an SDG 17 partnership between SunX Malta and the World Tourism Network, which Thomas is the owner and creator of. And we have a video now of that launch, which I'd like you to watch. And then after that, we'll go into a question and answer session. So Pratishta, if you could please play the video with a very cool, good-looking presenter. Hi, I'm happy to welcome you as well. I want to do 3 things. First, I want to lay out the framework of the new ICTP as we've conceived it. Secondly, I want to explain why we've recreated it. And thirdly, I want to show how we would hope it will operate going forward. The new ICTP, the International Climate and Tourism Partners, is an SDG 17 cooperative agreement between the World Tourism Network and SunX Malta. WTN is the online community established by Jürgen a year ago, and thanks to his outstanding broadcasting, a must-go-to news-focused medium. SunX Malta is a not-for-profit EU-based NGO, established as a legacy to my friend and mentor, the late Maurice Strong, climate and sustainability trailblazer half a century ago. We are happily partnered with the government of Malta, and we're advancing climate-friendly travel, low carbon, SDG linked, and Paris 1.5. We're an activist organization, more aligned with the position of Greta Thunberg than, say, UNWTO or WTTC. And we don't think the travel and tourism sector is going far enough, fast enough in terms of its response to the climate crisis. We buy into the view expressed by UN Secretary General Guterres based on the latest IPCC reporting, scientific reporting, that we're facing a code red for humanity. And for these reasons, not surprisingly, whilst we will sign the Glasgow Declaration when that becomes available, we'll be supporting Sunex Malta's Dash to Zero approach for net carbon zero in 2030 rather than 2050, and no greenhouse gas at all by 2050. It's the precautionary principle approach. We know we've already used 1.2 degrees of the Paris 1.5 degrees. In 5 short years since the Paris Agreement was signed. And the UN's own data says we're headed for at least 3 degrees as we move from 2050 to the end of the century. Some suggest it's 5 degrees. And life as we know it, possibly even life, can't sustain those kind of temperature increases in many, many, many hotspots in the world. The World Meteorological Organization has suggested that at the present rate, we'll hit 1.5 degrees within 5 years. And we're seeing the results in extremes of weather, floods, fires, hurricanes, and the like. There are more intense and more unpredictable patterns, and they decimate traditional travel and tourism flows. As I said, we acknowledge that the Glasgow Declaration of UNWTO and others continues the tradition of climate declarations of Jerba in 2003 and of Davos in 2007, where the industry has sought to come together to respond to this crisis. It is a positive step forward, but it simply doesn't go far enough, fast enough, and the focus on 2050 has to be put into perspective with what's happening on the ground now. We have to have resilience now, as well as a reduction in emissions for 2030 and 2050. We need to have support mechanisms for this. So by combining the strengths of Sunex Malta in climate impact analysis and response, and of WTN and ETN in industry and public communications, we think we can add a new dimension. And yes, beyond the noble declarations, but into solid transformation support systems from Sunex Malta, for example, a registry for transparent action on sustainability and climate plans, an SDG 17 resilience network for dealing with climate impacts today, and a strong climate champions community. We're aiming for 100,000 across all UN states by 2030 to help companies and communities as they transform. Add to this the widespread outreach from WTN, ETN, and the Travel News Group, and you create a new dynamic in the mix. That will be the new ICTP. Always green and sustainability focused, as it has been, and now clean and climate led, with well-known sector activists at the helm. And we're open for others to join us. The task is so massive to help travel and tourism transform as a lead sector in the drive for a new climate economy. One of our primary differentiators will be the desire to create a market for climate-friendly travel, low carbon, SDG-linked, Paris 1.5 trajectory, with a big focus on connecting like-minded consumers, communities, and companies, using all of the tools of our electronic media-driven world and our websites, ictp.travel and climate.travel. Providing real member value through a very low cost participation, bringing CFT, climate-friendly travel communities and companies, together with CFT consumers. With an electronic membership card on phones, hooking up with an electronic certificate on corporate and destination websites, bringing into play hotels and restaurants who choose to join our community with special offers to climate-friendly travelers to secure and keep customers, and with direct booking so that they're able to keep a larger portion of the reservation fees. With a growing support system of SunX Malta SDG 17 partners, as well as a global network of young, strong climate champions to be the innovation dynamic in the system. It's an exciting prospect. Jürgen and I are very charged by this. And I'd like to invite our other board members here today, Alain, Walter, Bear, and Vijay, to give their own perspectives. Thank you.
You're good to go, Jeffrey.
Thank you. I guess we're back again. Yeah. So there you have it. Not bad for a guy who only owns one sweater, right? So you've heard basically about 3 of the SDG 17 partners of the 20 to 30 that we currently have and have been building up with over a number of years, including big organizations like the World Travel and Tourism Council. We haven't quite worked out what we would do together, but we have them as a supporter for our registry. And we will stop the presentations here. You've heard from RiskLayer, you've heard from Tomorrow's Air, and now you've heard from me about ICTP. And we'll go into a period of questioning and answers. I think we have Bijan at least with us from RiskLayer. Christina's on the west coast of the US and she should be sleeping now, so we won't expect her to be joining us, but I'm here and we're happy to field your questions. As with yesterday, you can either write them in the chat box or you can raise your hand and ask a question, and we'll do our best to try to answer it. So,
Jeffrey, sorry, is Trevor here, not Bijan?
Hi.
Oh, hi, Trevor.
Yes, yes, I'm here. I'll just check. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, we can see
Great,
you
yep.
as well.
Likewise, so I'm here. Thank you.
I think you and Bijan must be brothers or something because you sound exactly the same. That's why I made a halt in your presentation, because I thought we were showing Bijan's before. And then, you know, you have a very similar accent, but you're not from Iran, are you?
Nope, Canada. It's the other side of the globe, but that's funny.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any questions, particularly for our friends from RiskLayer who gave such great presentations? I'm not seeing anything at the moment. Well, till we get anybody here, let me ask you a question, Trevor. You've clearly built or are building a strong relationship in the Asia Pacific, thanks to your arrangement that you told us about with PATA and GTZ, the German Development Agency. I know you have a lot of hotels in that region. How many are part of the RiskLayer's hotel resilience system, I think it's called?
Yeah, there's about 250 hotels in that region that's using our software to conduct their risk assessments and resilience assessment, as we outlined. Yep. And
do you get an active feedback from them, or is it more sort of trying to fill in forms, so to speak, or do they engage with you? Are they surprised when they see the nature of the risk, because your forms are very intensive, they go into quite some depth?
Yeah, many of the feedback that we get is actually just through two-way conversations with them. Many hotels are they really have the urge to do more in terms of resilience, preparing for hazards, and once they see sort of the whole audit, they some of those criteria they can do, but sometimes they're overwhelmed with just how much there is that they can do, and it's they want to go ahead with it all, but this sort of time frame is probably a bit longer than just a few months. Sometimes it even takes some time just to be able to answer those questions. That's why where it comes in handy to provide these sort of e-learning and these sort of places where they can understand what risk and hazard and all of this is about, and to understand their risks. Some of them don't realize the risks that they have.
Yeah, one of the areas that I'm hoping that we can engage further with you, and because it's a newish relationship that we have, is we have all these great students that are coming through our diploma course and will now be engaged as the people, for example, who've been with us for these 3 days, who even in this period, we think they'll get a pretty good knowledge of the challenges that are faced as climate change intensifies. And I think there's a real possibility for us to try to find a way to engage with them, to give them some sort of capacity for advancing your system. Because in the end, I think that almost every travel and tourism company would get a benefit from being able to assess their climate risk, which they're not doing at the moment. Trevor?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think we've had conversations before about engaging those students, interns, and I think that's great. And we'd like to broadcast our sort of message and initiative and the hotel resilient framework as much as we can. So of course we're interested in anything that spreads this whole strategy to a wider audience. And I also see there's another question here: if the hotel resilience system is limited to hotels. As of right now, the actual software is limited to hotels, but we are on other projects. This project with PATA tourism destination resilience, where we are focusing then on a greater area, which is the destination itself. And so we're looking to expand to then from hotels to the destination, and it is on the horizon eventually to get into other industries. So whether it's malls or conference centers, even schools, hospitals. But for right now, we're just focused on hotels, with the next step being destinations.
There's a question from Martina Keppel. How would this process be applicable to small local operators in hotels? And she finds it very difficult to motivate providers in rural areas who are struggling with so many other problems.
Yeah, exactly. And these are more of those hotels that are maybe overwhelmed by, the number of criteria, but we do strive to aim all of the criteria at, the wide range of hotels, from small to large to urban to rural. So yeah, we strongly believe that all of the criteria can be met to some degree, even in rural areas and with small hotels. I guess the big thing that is the question mark is whether the hotels have the capacity to implement some of the measures. But as far as assessing risk, this can be done, and there are still a lot of things that even a very small hotel can do to start at least planning for hazards, and of course responding. Whether these bigger mitigation criteria may be more difficult for them, but there's still plenty of things a small hotel can do.
Do you provide a service, Trevor, to if a hotel comes back and says, and we're seeing this now with our registry, which is not as complicated, it's carbon measurements and emission measurements, but we're seeing the fact that people come back and say, it's quite difficult to fill in this information because we don't have it. How would we get it? Could you help us? I mean, do you have any support services, or is that just your small team at RiskLayer?
Yeah, there are some countries that we're working in, say in the Philippines, where we do have third parties that can go on site, and if a hotel does not, they don't understand maybe their structure or their the risk there, then they can go on site and evaluate themselves. We do provide that, but we haven't. This service hasn't really been availed too much. So Philippines is one country that we could do that in,
and you have third parties, people who are, for example, like certification auditors, that kind of thing, or.
Yeah, people who are either engineers, civil engineers, or professional auditors. Yeah.
And somebody else is asking, what about old hotel buildings? How can they get access to the resilience system?
Old hotel buildings. I mean, I'm not sure I understand that question, but I mean, anyone can go on to our website and at hotelresilient.org, and there's links there to go to the audit system.
Does your audit system, if I can interpret the question, does your audit system sort of ask the question, how old is your property? And if it's a new build property, its capacity for withstanding disaster scenarios may well be better than if it's an old property. I think that's the gist of the question.
Yeah, of course. So we in the audit is the first part of it is putting in your location, the age of your building, and then there's questions about the building itself, if it's built to code, the sort of structural systems, and if it turns out that your building is in a very poor condition, of course you can still go ahead with the audit and everything. And if that poor condition then aligns with a hazard that makes the risk, the vulnerability of the building even worse, then it's possible that that building would not be qualify for a certification. But doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to still go ahead with using the whole system, the software to improve things. And we're also then available for to discuss how that can be, how improvements can be made that are more structural, that have to do with age.
In the end, Trevor, if I fully understand it, the real strength comes a little bit like Christina's system. I don't know if you saw that, and what we're thinking of in ICTP the same way. You know, there's this supposedly growing band of green-minded, and I would look for climate resilience-minded consumers. And I guess if you can hook them up with properties that are not only assessing the risk, but are doing things to respond to the risk, that's where you get a kind of double whammy win-win. Is that a fair analysis?
Yeah, exactly. The point is to link those who are, first off, there's got to be a willingness on the hotel to be wanting to make improvements, to even understand resilience and the risks that they have. And yeah, we are then one provider of at least giving them some knowledge about the risks, providing them tools to see, even looking at the standards themselves, they can see what it is they could be doing. And then we are also, of course, always interested in linking them to either the third party, sort of auditors we have on site, or anyone else who can be providing services that can improve the resilience of the hotel.
And what about insurance companies? Are insurance companies supporting your work? Because I guess you reduce the risk for them if a hotel not only does the risk analysis, but takes some action to respond to it.
Yeah, insurance companies are definitely interested, especially in our risk models with our parent company, RiskLayer. And they are also interested in, seeing if a hotel does well on the resilience audit, that maybe they could get a more accurate assessment of what their insurance should be, which could lower rates. Hopefully that's the idea, but what they still want is sort of a certain number of hotels that they would be going for, and they also don't always look exactly at the damages. If a earthquake or something happens, they start just saying, if this type of event happens, then they will get this much, right?
Then they exclude it from the policy.
Then they exclude it, and then the model does not necessarily, or the resilience of that hotel doesn't necessarily matter. It's more to do with the location. But yeah, we're working with insurance providers to see how we can best, incorporate, the details of the hotel, if they are actually resilient, if that can then somehow lower their rates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I can see a win-win if you're a hotel and you're told you can have your insurance rates lowered without making any more negative impacts on your policy. I think that could be quite interesting. I don't see any more questions, and I'm not in favor of sort of hanging on to see if there are any.
There's one question, Jeffrey. Just please, do you have a risk management support system? That's for Trevor, and that's from Grace.
I mean, we ourselves have a lot of experience with risk management. We have, in the hotel resilience standards, there's many criteria that cover how to handle risk for the hotel sector, for hotels. I'm not sure if that's answer to your question. And we also provide consultancy services on risk management for hotels. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not.
Grace, do you feel, Grace is always quick to come up and tell you if you don't answer her questions. She's one of the students on our course, and I always keep an eye out for when Grace is about to come in with a demon question. Grace, are you comfortable with Trevor's answer? No, Grace is out with her vegetables. Okay, look, I think that's probably where we should call a halt to this today. Grace has emerged. Hi, Grace.
Actually, Jeffrey, you're right. I'm always out with the vegetables. And yeah, I just really wanted to find out if there is this risk management support system. Because if we actually go to these clients and there is a risk, the next question is how do they manage it? And so I think the question is answered to an extent.
Trevor, I think, did you follow that? Grace is asking, what are the next steps if a risk is found? You know, how do they manage that risk? Is that something that you help them with?
Yeah, exactly. The first step is the risk assessment, and then starting to look at the options for risk treatment. So, I mean, if within our standards, we have we outline, you know, how this should be done, but also as a consulting service, then we can also take a hotel through that whole process, and as well as looking at the financial side of it. So not just saying they should just do everything that they can, and you know, all the structural mitigation that, of course, things cost money. So looking at what it makes sense for that size of the business.
So they can get an initial knowledge if they're browsing the information related to the risk analysis forms and the standards on the website. And then if that doesn't give them enough, if I'm reading correctly, they can then purchase services from RiskLayer, where they'll get specific advice, specific support. Is that correct, Trevor?
Yeah, exactly. We can work with hotels one-on-one to take them through all of the additional steps once they've completed a risk assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly we haven't built out the climate resilience component, but we have a massive information which we've been collecting in SunX Malta, and we keep it on a portal. And I can see, again, thinking of our young climate champions, how they would be in a position to, you know, to access this information, which would be a relatively low cost way for them. Particularly, I'm thinking of people who might be in developing countries, the global south. Anything that they can get without having to spend money is always a plus. Okay, I think we can bring this to a close today. I'd like to thank Trevor for being with us and helping to answer the questions. And we want to thank all of the people who've been attending. And I want to thank the team who've made my life so much easier, because I've been trying to get all this stuff pre-recorded, because I've found on other webinars, you spend a lot of time in lost communications, but we have a really good team from our diploma students. I want to thank Angela Rodriguez and Ariana Stephen and Pratishta Parajuli for, you know, being there and making all of the presentations fit in so well. So thanks a lot, guys. Thank you, those of you who've stuck with us. That's still the vast majority. We have another session tomorrow. We're going to go deeper into the registry and the metrics and the measurement of carbon, all around issues of the different, not just carbon, but the different greenhouse gases, measurements, and what it requires for participation in the registry. We have Hans Friedrich, the registrar, who's a former Director General of the International Bamboo and Rattan Association based in Beijing, and a former European Director of IUCN. He's a very knowledgeable and very nice guy, and I look forward to seeing you with Hans tomorrow. Thanks very much.